Good morning, everybody. My name is William Berg. I'm president of the Board of Directors of Preservation Sacramento, and I'd like to welcome you to the first Preservation Sacramento Roundtable of 2020. This is our quarterly member meeting and public forum for historic preservation advocacy and public history organizations in Sacramento. Preservation Sacramento is a 501c4 nonprofit, and we are a citywide historic preservation advocacy group. And just to give you a brief rundown of what will be on the agenda today, I'm waiting for Wes Sams from the City of Trees Parade to join our presentation to tell us a little bit about the parade that's happening today. Preservation Sacramento is one of the sponsors of this parade. Then we'll be hearing from Sean deCourcy from the City of Sacramento. And then we're going to just give a very brief mention of the walking tour that we are going to be leading at 3 o'clock downtown Sacramento before the parade. Markos Egure is going to talk about the WX Mural project. We're going to give some updates about our annual report and our plans for 2022 as an organization. And Karen Jacques is going to provide an update about what's happening at the California State Capitol Annex. So, well, I know we're waiting on the folks from the City of Trees Parade, but they're not here. So, until they join us. Oh, wait, perfect timing.
There we go.
Patrick.
Morning.
Good morning. So, we were just talking about the City of Trees Parade and what's happening today. And so, can you fill us in on what's happening and where it's happening and what it's about?
Absolutely. Laissez les bon temps rouler. Happy Mardi Gras, everyone. I'm Patrick Stelmach, one of the organizers of the City of Trees Parade. It's happening today as part of the Mardi Gras festivities. It's happening on Capitol Mall, starting at the state capitol at 10th Street and marching down Capitol Mall and then taking a right on 2nd Street through Old Sacramento and then finishing at the Railroad Museum. And we'll be parking the parade floats for participants to kind of walk around and explore and look up close. It'll be on the 1849 scene. I thought I'd give a little history lesson on kind of where Mardi Gras came from, kind of its roots, how it came to America, how it spread, and how we're bringing it to Sacramento and reinterpreting it in our own cloth. So as you may know, Mardi Gras happens every year. It's on Fat Tuesday coming up here, the day before Ash Wednesday, which is historically marks the beginning of Lent. But actually, Mardi Gras is an entire season. It starts on Three Kings Day, usually January 6th. So for 2 months, there are Mardi Gras festivities. Some historians believe, trace thousands of years to pagan traditions around ancient Rome. And when Christianity came to Rome, religious leaders blended it with the holidays. Some other actually contest that as actually a response to the Catholic Church banning sex and meat during Lent, and so people party and indulge as much as they could before Lent. But only when it reached France did it become Mardi Gras. And so this is like the late 17th century. Louis XIV, sent French Canadian explorers to modern day New Orleans. Hence La Louisiane, that's the name Louisiana in honor of Louis XIV. And so so the Mardi Gras tradition spread there. It was called Carnival in the Caribbean and South America. But it wasn't for another 100 years until 1837, where we had the first Mardi Gras parade in Mobile, Alabama. And so there's different parades in different neighborhoods. These are organized by crews, Krewe. These are like mystic societies, usually named after Roman or Greek mythology, and each one has a different theme each year. Most famously was the Crew of Rex. They invented a lot of the Mardi Gras traditions, including our Mardi Gras colors, purple, gold, and green. And they're the biggest ones. There's also, historically Mardi Gras in the South has been very segregated. So a lot of these crews were for Christian white men only, but there was a crew of Zulu, which is the oldest Black American crew They've been around since 1909, and each crew has its own floats. They have their own trinkets or throws, as they call them. That's what I'm wearing right here. This is from the crew of Toth in Mardi Gras. Another like playful, modern day is like the crew of Tux. They like threw out these little stuffed animals. And our crew here in Sacramento is a crew of trees. So obviously costumes and masks are basically required, but they're not Halloween costumes. They're like fairies, animals, peoples from myths, medievals, or just colored feathers and capes. And the phrase, the expression you may hear around town is "Laissez les bon temps rouler." It's a Cajun French phrase meaning "let the good times roll." And of course, then we Mardi Gras without beads. And every year in Mardi Gras, there's 25 million pounds of beads that get thrown out, and oftentimes they clog storm drains. So it's kind of an environmental disaster. But there's groups that are trying to reverse this. There's a group called ARC-GNO that recycles beads. It's a nonprofit that creates jobs for people with intellectual disabilities that cleans, sorts, and recycles these beads. And we actually bought 330 pounds of these beads that we're going to be throwing in the parade tonight. And these are like, all of them are actually pretty unique. They're like glass beads, and they're really unique beads. So, Mardi Gras is really just about showing your stuff, showing your best threads. It's the perfect celebration to lift up Sacramento culture. We're not trying to recreate New Orleans. We're trying to, express our creativity. And our hope is to foster greater expression and cultural pride in Sacramento. So, Mardi Gras is a great format for that. A big part of the Sacramento culture is Burning Man culture. So we have a big Burning Man presence. So we'll have infinite spin that dances with like hula hoops and like fire spinning. And we'll have Burning Man art cars, 2-story vehicles that be like lighting up in beautiful LED light displays. They'll have like huge sound systems, one called Art Deco Fish. And these are like interactive people movers. They're actually street legal, as a matter of fact. So the top floor is like a viewing deck and a dance floor, and they just really bring joy to people. There's going to be Corky's Cork Car. There's going to be a number of different marching bands. The Grant Union High School Drumline, world famous, is also going to be participating, and we'll just have hundreds of costumed marchers in the parade. But it's really a family-friendly affair that's supposed to bring our city together and really show Sacramento our own culture, our own flair. And so, we're eternally grateful for the support of preservation in Sacramento. We're trying to make every dollar go as far as possible. So we have a team of volunteers that's going to be closing the streets. We're kind of innovating. Usually there's a really heavy police presence. So we're trying to scale back the police presence by having more volunteers along the parade route, which reduces our costs. Also, I think it kind of makes them more approachable event for the community. And at the, as I mentioned, at the end of the parade route, we'll have a big festivities with the parade floats, and there's also Louisiana Sioux's Cajun Food and Music Festival that's happening underneath the freeway at Old Sacramento. So I'd love to open up to the questions if anybody has any, and about Mardi Gras or our City of Trees parade, and I hope to see you all there.
All right. If there's any questions, you can type them into the chat. You can type them into the Q&A, or you can raise your hand on the participant list if you want to ask a question.
And I'm here too. I got here just a couple minutes late. I just wanted to say hi.
Okay, hi,
Happy to help answer questions. And great presentation, Patrick. Very cool.
Yeah. I don't see any questions from the audience yet, but Wes, maybe you could introduce yourself. And Patrick has talked about the history of Mardi Gras and what's happening today. Could you tell us about the organization behind this and your role?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Wes Sams. I'm the lead organizer for the Curiosity Collaborative, and we're a local nonprofit organization that was formerly called March for Science Sacramento. And we've been doing these environmental demonstrations to, around climate change and things like that. And I used to live in New Orleans, and I love the format of Mardi Gras. And for all the reasons that Patrick described, I really think that the format can be applied easily here in Sacramento to lift up Sacramento culture and to be a time and a place for us to celebrate our lives here in Sacramento. And so I thought, well, what's a parade except like a demonstration that's got floats in it, And so we just used our entity to build the container for the parade, and then we reached out to other local cultural hubs like the NAACP, Wide Open Walls, Sac Valley Spark, which is the Burning Man Coalition, and used their reach into those communities to bring people into our parade. And our hope is that our reach will continue to grow and that we can reach out to diverse cultural groups throughout the Sacramento area. And if they have something spectacular to show the world, that they can use our parade as a vehicle to do so. So we're just kind of building the container for the parade and then letting the community come in and fill it in. And we got a lot of response. We also are including a roller skating group called the Sac Quad Squad that is kind of elevating the new popularity of roller skating as a cultural phenomenon here in Sacramento. And they're in the very front of the parade. And then we've got thanks, Jennifer. I got a shout out to my illustrator, Anthony Egure, who's at the Dead Whatever on Instagram. If you want to follow him, he's a tattoo artist and he's just a really talented illustrator. And he is a local here in Sacramento, right? Or was a local. He recently had to move back down south. But what was I saying? We're reaching out to these hubs and using them to get more people into the parade. And I'm hoping that each year the parade will get bigger and better. And, I got to really, really thank Preservation Sacramento for jumping in as a royalty level sponsor in our very first year and believing in us that we could do it. We really, really couldn't have done it without you. And I feel like, the fact that you made a decision based on principle, based on your mission, based on your values of lifting up Sacramento heritage and culture, it's just so important to us, and I want to thank you.
All right, thank you. We did have one question about the parade route, and Patrick typed it into the chat, but just for those listening, could you just repeat the parade route and where people can see it happening?
Absolutely.
Oh, go ahead, Patrick. Yeah.
Oh yeah. I was gonna say my favorite place to watch the parade will be Old Sacramento waterfront along 2nd Street. I think that's gonna be the most happening place. There's but it's also gonna be most crowded. If you're not into crowds, Capitol Mall is a great place to spread out with a lawn chair and cooler, and that's gonna be where everybody's gonna be starting their stuff. The parade starts at the state capitol at 10th Street. And it's going to go down Capitol Mall to 2nd Street, and then through 2nd Street to the Railroad Museum. So if you want to see the start, hang out at 10th Street. If you're riding a bike, there's going to be free bike valet parking. 9th Street, excuse me.
Yeah.
And then bike parking is going to be on 5th Street and Capitol Mall. But there's plenty of parking garages nearby.
Yeah, and get out there at 5. Hopefully parking won't be that bad out there, but we've got free passes on RT. If you go to our Instagram account, we shared a post from RT that you can use to ride for free on light rail and regional transit, and then and bike parking is highly encouraged. I think you'll have a better Mardi Gras experience if you've got mobility aside from a car. And that goes for New Orleans Mardi Gras too.
Okay. And then we also had a question from someone who recently attended an inaugural Lunar New Year celebration in Southside on 10th Street, in which multiple communities participated. And the Mardi Gras season if we did a future event, is that a potential community that could be part of this?
Absolutely. Which lunar event was that? Was that the Lion Dancers?
Oh yes, there were line dancers. It was held by a nonprofit organization called My Sister's House, who has a resale shop on 10th Street in the redeveloped Japantown, or post redevelopment Japantown of the 1950s and 60s, and it was multiple organizations. And I don't know if you know Jason Jong or not, but he's a jazz musician and activist. But he's the one who looped us into it. Preservation Sacramento had a booth there, talking about our the historic district nomination we're working on, but there's a lot of common ground there. So maybe this is something for the planning cycle. I know you've probably got your hands full getting ready for today's event. Having put on events myself, I know this is like, I'm sure like both of your heads are filled with all the details. Thanks for doing all the work, and I think that we're gonna come and have all the fun. So.
Well, we're going to be having fun too. Me and Patrick are going to be riding up in the top of that decofish car that he described up in the observation deck. So you'll see us up there, and we'll throw you some beads if you wave to us. So.
Yeah, well, I'll be there, and some of our board members are going to be participating in the parade, and hopefully a lot of our membership and friends and people watching will be there to see it all happen. So laissez le bon temps rouler, and we'll see you this afternoon at 5. We're going to do our warm-up walk at 3, but we'll see you then.
Lovely. Fantastic. Thank you so much for having us.
All right. Okay, next on the agenda, I'd like to introduce Sean deCourcy, Preservation Director, and he's going to introduce his new staff person and actually show both update us on what's happening at the city level in historic preservation, and then show some media. So Sean, I'll just let you take it away and introduce your new planner.
Thank you. Yeah. Hi, Bill. Good morning, everybody. Sean deCourcy, Preservation Director with the City of Sacramento. I'm actually, before I introduce Henry, I'm going to share my screen so that our presentation is set up here as we speak. All right. Okay. Can everyone see my screen there?
We can see it.
All right, terrific. Oh, actually, if I share my screen, you won't be able to see Henry, will you? I better stop sharing. Let me go ahead and introduce Henry. So this is Henry Feuss. He's actually going to introduce himself. And Henry is our new planner and has been with us for a couple weeks now. And it's been a huge help to the department to have him on board. So with that, go ahead, Henry, and say a few words.
Thanks, Sean, and good morning, everybody. Yeah, so I have a background in facility management and construction management and building restoration. So I come actually from the East Coast. So I went to school in Rhode Island for historic preservation, and I'm moving out to Sacramento in the next couple of months. And I'm actually getting on a plane in a couple hours to stay in Sacramento for the week and do some tours around the city with Sean. So yeah, just long story short, like I'm just almost a month working here, and every single person I worked with the city so far has been really helpful and always able to answer questions and just very kind. So I'd just like to commend everybody for that, including Sean. Sean has been amazing. So with that, I'll give back to Sean so we can start our presentation.
All right, terrific. Thank you, Henry. Yeah, as I said, Henry, or as Henry said, he's got a background in construction management and historic preservation, which is comforting because I have a similar background. If you know my background, I spent about 5 years working on the library and courts building and other projects with Arntz Builders. And it's nice to have somebody who has that hands-on construction experience, because a lot of what we do at the city is working with contractors. So we have to know how to speak that language. So with that, I'm going to share my screen, and that takes care of our first announcement. And I'm going to go to the next page. So you may be aware that we, at the last Preservation Roundtable I presented on this, we recently completed a certified local government grant to sort of up our game when it comes to education and outreach. This grant had several deliverables associated with it. One of them was the postcard that you see here on the slide on the right. It's a two-sided postcard, but some of you may have received that postcard in the mail. And that was was a postcard that was sent out to all owners of historic properties in the city, so both landmarks and contributing resources, letting them know that they owned a historic property and giving them contact information at the city for if they're imagining a project in the future or just want to know what it means to own historic property. This postcard, it specifically was sort of born out of the Historic District Plans project, when we did a lot of outreach and realized that a lot of people who own historic properties in Sacramento did not know they owned a historic property. So we got this grant as a supplement to that outreach effort. And the postcard was one of the projects. If I could just ask everyone to mute themselves, I'm getting a little bit of background noise. I'd appreciate it. Thank you. So then other sort of, there were several other parts of the project, but then the other sort of big part of the project were the creation of 2 educational video modules. So there's one for realtors and developers, and then one for teachers. And what I'd like to do, actually, they're about 15 minutes long, so they're a little bit long, but I'd like to play them for you. I think you'll find them informative and interesting and entertaining. So, and you may recognize some familiar faces because we were well supported by members of the community who volunteered their time to perform in these videos. So with that, I'm going to share this video. Hopefully everything will work properly.
Hello, Sacramento. My name is Luis Sumter, and I've been a realtor in Sacramento for over 20 years. And I'm here to challenge some common myths about historic preservation. Myth number 1, historic properties cannot be updated or changed. Residential historic properties like these have no restrictions on interior changes. So popular renovations like kitchen and bath remodels are as easy as obtaining a building permit. And additions are common and typically found on the back of the historic building. Myth number 2, historic designation typically results in lower property values. This is simply not borne out of the evidence. In fact, economists agree that historic properties typically have a higher property value than buildings without a historic designation, hands down. Myth number 3, historic properties cannot be insured. There are literally thousands of historic properties across Sacramento, and with the exception of a few, they all are insured. Sure, some insurance companies make it more difficult to insure historic properties, but most understand that historic properties really are no different than other older buildings, and they can be insured at reasonable rates. Myth number 4, historic districts create stagnation and do not allow a city to grow. Look at this vibrant corridor that we're standing in. These historic commercial buildings have been repurposed from their original industrial or retail uses and now are home to some of the most vibrant and popular restaurants in the city. And just look across the street. This residential duplex fits in nicely with its historic neighboring residences and businesses, yet it's brand new. Bottom line, historic preservation does not negatively affect property values. It even tends to result in higher and more stable values over time. More importantly, historic preservation makes a city vibrant, and it creates an identity and a culture that we should all be proud of. Which is why much of my business has been working with clients who buy and sell historic properties. What do you think, Matt?
Yeah, I think this block of historic buildings right here is a great case in point. This block is called Bungalow Row, and the city had the foresight and did the work and study to set aside these buildings, all built about 100 years ago, to create a unique historic district. Hi, I'm Matt Piner. I'm an architect who's lived and worked here in the city of Sacramento since roughly 1989 when I bought an old house. So one of the things that's really great about the old buildings is that these things that are built into them are passive and permanent, meaning that they work without any moving parts or energy expenditure, and they're there for the life of the home. So they've been there for 100 years, they'll be there for another 100 years. The people that buy them are proud of them, and the people that walk and bike these streets, then come to visit, appreciate the fact that we have this window back in time. So one of the misconceptions about old buildings is that they're energy hogs, that somehow it costs more money, you're gonna have higher bills, but actually that couldn't be further from the truth. So one of the sayings that a well-known architect said is that the greenest building is the one that's already built. And because the energy and effort that went into building them has already been done, we call that embodied energy. We don't have to expend that energy again. Some people think that these buildings are just old and we should tear them down. But what happens is we lose that embodied energy. If we lose them forever. We don't get that back. Another thing that these buildings have taught us is they were built in an era where Sacramento, our river city, actually would experience regular flooding. And because of that, these buildings were built at a certain distance above the ground, having flood basements and other features. Today, those sheltered, earth-coupled areas under the house stay cool, and they're a great place to run ductwork and provide a very stable temperature for these homes. Because they were built at a time that our great-grandparents' generation, they didn't have air conditioning. So they had figured out how to shade the buildings with eaves. They learned that our temperate climate makes it pleasant to be out front, so they have these broad front porches. They have good cross ventilation features, high ceilings. They were really designed for an era without air conditioning. So they are, by their nature, very energy efficient already. So these are just a few of the features and what these buildings have to teach us, and why we can thank the preservation program here in the city that identifies and helps preserve and protect these buildings. One final thought about these beautiful homes in this downtown area is that these lots generally are very deep. They go all the way to a service alley in the back. And because of that, there are actually these spaces within these neighborhoods by design which allow the potential for infill housing. So it's really an important thing that these neighborhoods give us, that we can thank those who came before us for providing for us. Wouldn't you agree, Bay?
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. My name is Bay Miri, and I'm with Miri Development. I'm standing here along the historic R Street corridor. This historic corridor is really special to me. There's been a lot of hard work put in by a lot of people in our community to make this corridor come alive. Nowhere else in the city do you have completed streets, big patios, and such an abundance of really cool local restaurants, cafes, bars, and housing up above than you do along the historic R Street corridor and the K Street downtown corridor. Behind me is the historic B&G building at 11th and R Street. I was lucky enough to be involved in this mixed-use building that has a really cool vegan fast food restaurant on the ground floor and a creative office engineering firm on the upper floors. I was also lucky enough to be involved in other historic rehab projects at 14th and R and in downtown on K Street. Without historic preservation, our cities lose their character and their culture. And historic preservation is absolutely important to the housing crisis, which is such an important priority right now. Historic preservation allows us to bring all different types of really cool housing to our central cities. Without it, everything would be very vanilla and plain. Without the Mills Act and federal tax credits, these historic preservation projects would not be possible. They are very valuable tools, and historic preservation is critical to the housing crisis. Am I right, Mike?
You bet, Bay. Hi, I'm Mike Melanowski. I'm a Sacramento architect with experience on dozens of historic adaptive reuse projects over the years. We're here at a building on R Street that was formerly the Lawrence Warehouse. It was built 100 years ago, one of the first in Sacramento out of reinforced concrete, to store just about anything, entire households, including their Model T car. Today, it has 116 affordable artist housing units that range from studio live-work units to full 3-bedroom family housing. This building's financing was helped by federal tax credits, and in fact, it used two kinds of tax credits, both the housing tax credits and the historic tax credits. Right next door is another historic building, a 3-story brick building, even older than the Lawrence. Today, it's office, over ground level restaurant, and it was able to use Mills property tax abatement. When I look at these projects, I think win-win, no matter how you look at it. Josh, what do you think?
You know, absolutely. You know, we're concerned with both financially successful projects as well as the company's legacies. These types of projects are great for both. I'm Josh with Downtown Rail Yard Venture, or DRV. We believe that preservation matters for business, for tourism, for culture, and for identity. Within the central shops, within these amazing buildings, we see this as an opportunity, not a constraint. The central shops at one point was the largest industrial facility on the West Coast. Each building here had a specific purpose. Over to the west, you see the boiler shop. Over to the east, you see the paint shop. As such, each of those buildings contributed in its unique way to establishing railroad-related equipment and services. Perhaps this is the most special spot in the central shops. This interior plaza, courtyard, you see the different eras. This place we're standing here, I think it's truly one of the most special places within the central shops. You can just imagine the energy, the focus. Each building represents a different era. Each building integral to the success of the western terminus of the Transcontinental Railroad. This place is awesome. You know, thousands and thousands of people have worked at the rail yards. It was Sacramento's largest employer for many, many years. Those folks who worked at the rail yards, you can just feel their hard work, their efforts, their sweat within each of these buildings. Railroad equipment and railroad-related services were all formed here and established here, and ultimately led to the formation of the Transcontinental Railroad. You know, Central Shops, it's adjacent to downtown Sacramento. It's adjacent to the Sacramento Valley Station, one of the largest intermodal facilities in the country. And as such, this historical location, once part of the Central Pacific Railroads, is now set up to be part of the extension and growth of Sacramento moving forward. These buildings, they benefit from state and federal historic tax credits, which help offset the cost of rehabilitation and repurposing these amazing structures. They're complicated, they're challenging, they're beautiful, but it costs a lot of money. Those historic tax credits really enable projects like this to establish that cultural identity and center for the rail yards. When people are here, they feel these buildings, they're authentic. You know, people have been working here for so long. You can just see it in the buildings. They had purpose. They feel the effort that went into each one of these buildings. They're unique. As such, it's perfect for establishing the identity and cultural center for the rail yards moving forward. So the rail yards doubles the footprint of downtown Sacramento. We're going to bring in thousands of new residents. We're going to bring in new business. We're going to bring in new entertainment facilities. We're going to bring in a new medical campus. Central to that is the central shops, the historic district. It's the authentic cultural identity for the rail yards. Personally, for me, to be part of a project, to work on these amazing buildings that has the scope and the reach and affects the legacy of Sacramento is amazing. Any final words, Luis?
You've just heard from real estate and development professionals who understand the incredible value of working with historic properties. There's a bias in our industry that we would like to dispel about working with historic properties as both expensive and unpredictable, which typically is not the case. So we hope you will reach out to one of us or city staff the next time you're dealing with a historic property, so you can learn more about how historic preservation can help our community thrive.
Okay, so that's our first video, and then I'll play our second video, which is targeted towards teachers and students, grade school students.
Sean, I just want to mention mute your mic when the video is playing because we could hear you.
Okay, I wasn't sure if it would mute the volume as well.
No,
I will.
Okay.
I will do that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's discover Sacramento together. In Old Sacramento, you can discover several aspects of Sacramento's history during the gold rush era more than 160 years ago, including the role of transportation by river, horse, and train in creating Sacramento. Old Sacramento also showcases the role that redevelopment, once referred to as urban renewal, played during the mid-20th century. City officials demolished other old buildings nearby, but routed the construction of Interstate 5 around Old Sacramento to preserve the city's early history and to promote it as a heritage tourism attraction inspired by colonial Williamsburg. While you're at it, grab some selfies in front of the many cool sights, or grab a bite to eat at one of the many eateries in this farm to fork capital. Before the buildings and structures, Sacramento truly was a city of rivers inhabited by the Nishinan, Sacramento's native people. The Nishinan lived all throughout Northern California. Their southernmost boundary began below the Cosumnes River, headed east to Khyber's, and included both sides of the Sacramento River. Years ago, the Nishinan lived in towns made up of extended family groups of different sizes, led by Hook, head man, and Mayan, head woman.
Before the founding of Sacramento, many different indigenous groups made their homes in the area. What is now the city of Sacramento occupies the ancestral homelands of the Nisenan, Southern Maidu, Valley and Plains Miwok, Patwin Wintun, and the people of the Wilton Rancheria, currently Sacramento's only federally recognized tribe. These cultures still exist today and are part of the past, present, and future of the city.
Buildings can move. The raging rivers in the city of Sacramento created problems for the city developers as they flooded and destroyed Sacramento several times. The solution? Literally lifting the building several feet high using jacks. This home, built in 1885, belonged to Llewellyn Williams. It was moved twice before finding its current location here on H Street. This paint treatment was done recently in 2019. It's an excellent example of historic preservation. How did Llewellyn and the other early citizens of Sacramento deal with Sacramento's hot climate? I'm standing on it. They built these excellent porches to remain cool. And inside, architects put in parallel windows to allow for airflow throughout the home. Buildings can grow over time. The Sacramento City Hall was constructed in 1911. The new City Hall came into existence in 2005. With modern architecture embracing the past, this turn-of-the-century City Hall building reads as a separate structure, still echoing the color palette of the older structure, yet renewed with an architectural twist.
The Sacramento Public Market, opened in 1923, is a beautiful harmony of old and new designs. It was designed by renowned architect Julia Morgan. The building served as a gathering place for over 50 years. It is where the community could find their groceries, clothing, and other items. In the 1970s, the public market was sold and converted into a hotel, the Sheraton Grand. The architect's goal was for the building to not only serve the hotel, but also to bring back the essence of the vintage experience. The brick and terracotta stonework was preserved, while the interior looks and feels like a modern hotel. Located across from Sacramento's Convention Center, the former public market building in one of the city's largest concert halls, Julia Morgan's Public Market continues to serve as a backdrop for the city's visitors. Rehabilitating historic properties like the Sheraton Grand can be a critical part of promoting energy efficiency. by preserving it instead of creating more and adding to the city's carbon footprint.
Sacramento is located in the center of California's Central Valley, one of the most fertile agricultural areas in the country. This location made the city great for processing agricultural products early in its history. Facilities that packaged and processed food were located all over the city. Many of these buildings remain today, but have been converted for other uses, such as housing, office parks, and storage facilities. The Globe Mills building was once a facility that processed grain into flour and pasta. Originally built in 1913, it processed grain on the northern edge of downtown for nearly a century. The Globe Mills was eventually converted to low-income housing in 2006 by the Yousefi Development Company. The project took advantage of federal rehabilitation and low-income tax credits to complete the design conversion. The Globe Mills property is one of thousands of properties here in Sacramento and across the United States that have been preserved and retrofitted using tax credits and other preservation incentives. To find out more about these programs and read about other examples of this being done, visit the following web links for details.
Buildings can harbor unseen social history. The Nathaniel Colley and Associates law offices at 1810 S Street holds important historic and architectural significance for its association with Sacramento's Black community. The building was the office of civil rights attorney Nathaniel S. Colley, Sacramento's first African-American attorney to practice law in Sacramento. Colley's prominent and respected legal career fought to end segregation in housing, politics, and the workplace.
Lay the facts on the line about the existence of discrimination in housing. And the Supreme Court said that a state must use all of its resources in every reasonable manner to achieve desegregation.
Because of Colley, public housing practices were changed throughout California and the western states. People of color were finally able to apply for and receive housing. The building was designed by James C. Dodd, who was the first licensed African-American architect in Sacramento and the creator of important works, including the Shiloh Baptist Church, which is listed on the California Register and the National Register for its architectural significance. James C. Dodd is renowned for designing several important residences, including his own home in South Sacramento. In 2020, 1810 S Street was listed on the Sacramento Register for its association with Nathaniel Colley and James Dodd and continues to thrive today.
The building at 1515 4th Street was originally built as a restaurant called The Flower Garden by African-American entrepreneur Felix Flowers. The building included meeting rooms for African-American members of the Benevolent and Protective Order of Elks. Today, the building is more closely associated with the rich ethnic heritage of Japanese American veterans returning to Sacramento following World War II. After the war, the Flower Garden closed, and the Nisei, who are children of Japanese-born immigrants, left the internment camps and relocated here. Community leaders saw the need to establish a social hall dedicated to this growing population. In 1955, with the assistance of the Sacramento Japanese American Citizens League, the VFW Post 8985 acquired the property at 1515 4th Street for this purpose, where it continues to preserve this community's rich and sometimes tragic history. Sacramento once housed the fourth largest and most vibrant Japantown in the country, rivaling those of San Francisco, San Jose, and Los Angeles. Japantowns were segregated places where Japanese Americans could practice their religious and cultural traditions without harassment. That is until World War II, when these people were forced into internment camps hundreds of miles away. These atrocities decimated the local population and made it hard to maintain Sacramento's Japantown.
Sacramento was a very thorough example of the destruction of a Japantown, probably the most thorough on the West Coast. And considering the fact that Sacramento had, in the 1920s, by population percentage, been the most Japanese city of any American city, it's a really significant change.
Unfortunately, this made the area a prime target for urban renewal, a movement that emerged following World War II when urban cores, like downtown Sacramento, were seen as blighted and in need of gentrification. This led to the displacement of the poor and minority communities and the demolition of thousands of historic buildings throughout the country to make way for new, cleaner urban places. We see the scars of redevelopment today all over our city. These vacant lots throughout downtown or the freeways that cut through the city best show these scars. Neighborhoods like Oak Park and Del Paso Boulevard are primary examples of buildings that were razed and where freeways were built, essentially changing the fabric of these neighborhoods forever.
In 1850, the same year that California was admitted to the Union, St. Andrew's African Methodist Episcopal Church, or the AME Anvil Church, was founded. Standing to this day, it is one of the oldest congregations on the West Coast. Preacher Barney Fletcher led a small congregation and hosted several conferences boasting statewide attendance over the next 15 years. The original church was later replaced by a parking structure that now stands nearby a few busy intersections downtown, with most passerbys not aware of the historical markers around them. The spirit of St. Andrew's AME Church still lives on today in a new location only a few miles away, thereby preserving this unbelievable story told and inspiring active congregations everywhere.
The Oak Park neighborhood was created from farmland in 1887 when real estate developer Edwin Alsip subdivided the land and renamed it Oak Park after an 8-acre grove of oak trees that grew in its center. In 1911, with the population expanding and pressures growing to address water and sewage issues, Oak Park was annexed into the city along with several other outlying neighborhoods. Oak Park developed into a middle-class residential suburb with its own commercial district centered around Sacramento Avenue, which is now Broadway. Brick shop fronts, theaters, and other cultural and institutional buildings sprang up along the streetcar line that traversed the 100-foot-wide boulevard. Following World War II, many of the middle-class families and businesses relocated to suburbs farther from the city center. The migration of middle-class residents opened the door to African American residents who were being pushed out of their previous homes in the downtown by urban renewal. As a result, Oak Park developed a new cultural identity as an African American neighborhood. Social organizations and cultural institutions followed the migration, including the Shiloh Baptist Church, the Sacramento Observer newspaper, the Women's Civic Improvement Club, and Sacramento Black Panther Party. Against the backdrop of social unrest in the late 1960s and early 70s, several of Oak Park's long-standing businesses closed down and never reopened, such as Steen's Bar and Clarence Azevedo's clothing store. Meanwhile, urban renewal projects led to the demolition of most of Oak Park's historic business district along 35th Street. More recently, Oak Park has experienced a period of urban revitalization. The city established a historic district in the area in 2011 and benefited from an increasing number of diverse cultures. This evolution of Oak Park has created a larger discussion about gentrification, displacement, and created a dialogue between this area's residents, both old and new.
Founded in 1937, is the oldest school in Sacramento City Unified. Construction of the school was an undertaking funded by the U.S. Public Works Administration during the Great Depression. Designed by the local architectural firm of Starks and Flanders, which had also designed other landmark buildings in the city of Sacramento, including the Elks Temple and the courthouse. In 2002, the school was officially listed on the National Register of Historic Places, proving once again that historical preservation is all around us.
Sacramento's Midtown neighborhood serves as a hip, trendy scene for young professionals and families alike. It is the perfect example of how history interacts with present-day efforts to revitalize the city's core. Victorian period styles were popular from the 1840s to the early 1900s, known for their detail and reference of European-style architecture. It is not uncommon to find restaurants, nightclubs, coffee shops, or even art galleries located inside Victorian period homes. The Flamingo House is a great example of a residence being reused and reestablishing itself as a popular local business. During the middle of the last century, downtown was the scene of massive disruption when thousands of buildings were demolished by urban renewal. However, in Midtown, local preservation groups like the Sacramento Old City Association advocated for the preservation of whole neighborhoods through the creation of historic districts. These districts have helped slow the demolition happening in the city's West End and have created a network of authentic urban neighborhoods that makes up the cultural center of Sacramento today.
All right, so that concludes our the two videos that were associated with that grant. We'll be posting those on our website relatively shortly and conducting other outreach with them. But this is the first time they've been shown publicly, so consider yourselves lucky. So the next item I wanted to talk about are a few landmark nominations that we've been working on. So the 5 homes you see here are all on Montgomery Way in the Curtis Park neighborhood. They were recently listed by the City Council as our newest landmarks. So these 5 homes are all significant for their association with the Better Homes movement. And 4 of the 5 were designed by architects Dean and Dean, who designed many civic buildings in Sacramento, including many historic schools, the Memorial Auditorium, among others, and then had quite a prolific residential building career as well, including these 5 houses. So these were evaluated and determined eligible by historic environment consultants and recommended by approval from the Preservation Commission, and then ultimately approved by the City Council. All right, so the next buildings we have are also 2 landmarks. So the one on the right has recently been listed, and the one on the left is being nominated and has been recommended for listing by the Preservation Commission, and will be heard by the City Council next month. So the one on the right is 1140 40th Street, and the one on the left is 2701 E Street. Both of these buildings are significant for being excellent representations of the craftsman architectural style. Both were evaluated by historic environment consultants as well and recommended as eligible. One thing to note, the building on the right, 1140 40th Street, has sort of an interesting history and is an example of our process at the city. So this project in East Sacramento, or this building in East Sacramento, was originally part of a proposal to demolish the building and construct a new, much larger residence. As part of our review process, we evaluate buildings that are over 50 years old, and we evaluated this property. And historic environment consultants evaluated this property and recommended it as eligible. So we presented this finding to the property owner through several iterations, trying to propose a project that would not demolish it, but significantly modify it. At the end, they decided to sell the property and walk away from the project because they really wanted a new building, not to rehab this beautiful building. So they sold it to a person who was interested in preserving it, and asked the city, since the research had already been done by historic environment consultants, asked the city if we would consider taking it through the landmark process. And their primary driver, other than appreciating the history and the architecture of the building, because they're new property owners, they will benefit from a Mills Act contract. So I have a feeling that was sort of what pushed them over the edge. But the new property owner does really appreciate the architecture of the building and is interested in preserving it. So, and our next landmark nomination that just went to a director hearing and will go to the city council, the Preservation Commission next month. This is an extremely important residence. It was designed by and for the architect Leonard Starks. So this building, known as the Starks Saucerman residence, Saucerman, the current owner, it was also evaluated by historic environment consultants. They've clearly been busy. And Leonard Starks, if you aren't familiar with his firm, but the Leonard Starks firm designed many important buildings in Sacramento, some that still stand and some that do not, unfortunately, including the Elks Tower, the Alhambra Theater, the Senator Theater, Downtown Post Office, McClatchy High School, and literally hundreds of others. If you look at the staff report in Historic Environment Consultants report analysis, you will see just a list of hundreds of buildings that were designed by this firm. So a very important architect and a very important building that we're happy to take through the landmark nomination process. This is on Riverside Boulevard at 2911 Riverside Boulevard. So if you're traveling down Riverside in Northland Park, keep your eye out for this beautiful building. And then next we have a exciting property that we are working on. The background on this property is somewhat interesting, that Ed Carroll, who works for the State Office of Historic Preservation, is family friends with the property owners. And back when Ed was in graduate school, he began doing some sort of pro bono research on the property and had done quite a bit of research. And then at the end of his research process, realized a couple of the assumptions he had made at the beginning were faulty, and his conclusions did not make sense. And so he put the project on hold, meaning to get back to it, and started his career, never got back to it. But the property owner approached us and asked us to finish Ed's research. So one of our interns, Caitlin Grebe, has been working diligently on this evaluation, and we think we have the history of the building. And it is a farmhouse that was built in the 1880s. It's been somewhat modified, and it had a large porch it still has a porch, but it had what we think was a much larger porch that sort of wrapped around the building. But the majority of the architectural features and the form are still intact. And it's a very, very rare building type to still exist in Sacramento. So dating back from at least the 1880s. if not even older. So it's a fascinating property tucked away at 424th Avenue, also in Northland Park, but it's back behind sort of the residential suburban tracts that are there. And you wouldn't know it was there unless you got back here onto the property. It's surrounded by beautiful walnut and oak trees, very sort of reminiscent of Sacramento's agricultural past. So we're excited about this. It hasn't started the hearing process yet. We haven't finished even preparing the evaluation, but look for it in the coming months as another new landmark to the Sacramento Register. So with that, I will stop sharing my screen and open it up briefly to questions. It seems like we have some in the chat. I haven't been following along, but perhaps there's some questions there as well.
Oh, I realized it was muted. Vicky asked a question about where the last home was located. You said it was on 4th Avenue?
Yes, it's at 424th Avenue. So if you take 4th Avenue off of Riverside and take it all the way to the end, you'll see a little driveway into a bunch of trees. And behind that, there's a fence. And behind that gate and fence, there's this beautiful building.
All right, and there was a question about McClatchy High. Someone asking whether it was Sacramento's oldest school. I think it more accurately, it's the Sacramento's oldest existing high school. I mean, there were obviously high schools before this, and there's other schools older than it. But as far as, is that correct, or?
That sounds right. But I don't know. I mean, we definitely have some beautiful old schools. Some that still operate as schools, some that are not. Throughout the city and county, there are also examples of little one-room schoolhouses that have survived, mostly in the county. But yeah, so I'm not sure how you classify, oldest school, oldest existing school, oldest operating school, possibly.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, that. And speaking of schools, you had mentioned before the meeting about the North Sacramento School. Whether there's been any progress at the city about that, or is?
That is on our list. It's been nominated and listed on the National Register. And so whenever a building is listed on the National Register, we sort of add it to our list of landmark nominations. So we do have a list, sort of a backlog that we're trying to get through. We have 2 interns right now, Caitlin and Nicole, and that's their primary responsibility right now, is working on that backlog of landmark nominations. And we've been making progress. As you can see, we've been busy nominating individual landmarks, and we'll continue that effort with them. And now that Henry's on board as well, he's sort of helping manage them and oversee them through those nominations. So yeah, Sacramento School is definitely on our list. It's sort of a low-hanging fruit, if you will, since it's already been listed on the National Register. But it would be a good landmark to nominate in North Sacramento, where we have a new council member as well who hasn't had a landmark nomination in his district yet. So it would be a good one.
All right. And then there was a question, I think Michael Moore had a question about Mills Act grants. Were there any Mills Act contracts that are pending, or how, and I understand there's a limit of 12 a year, and how are people, are people grabbing those up, or is there?
We started out when we reenacted the program in 2018. We started out with about 6 contracts that were executed that year, and then we've been executing about 3 or 4 a year since then. And at the moment, I do not believe we have any submitted applications for contracts. So we should probably actually work with Preservation Sacramento to do some outreach, because we haven't done much outreach in the past couple of years, really since the program relaunched. So another round of outreach for that program would be good, including our videos. These videos mentioned, the developer video especially mentions the Mills Act several times. So yeah, we should do another round of outreach to make people aware.
Yeah, we'll be happy to help. Okay, well, I don't see any other questions, so if there's any other final comments from Sean or Henry, or anything to let people know about?
No, nothing for me. Thank you for having us. I'm glad you got to meet Henry. As Henry mentioned, I guess the one thing, as Henry mentioned, he'll be in town next week, and we'll be sort of doing a tour. So if anyone has any sort of active projects that they want us to come, do a walkthrough on, we're going to do a few of those. So send us a note, and we'll be glad to stop by and do an inspection.
Okay, well, thank you to Sean, and welcome to Henry, and thanks for sharing those videos. It was pretty mind-blowing stuff and a lot of great information.
Yeah, great. We'll work with you on sharing those out. And as soon as we have them finalized, we have a couple more edits to make.
Okay, great. Actually, there was one technical edit that was mentioned that someone said that they felt like the music levels were a little high. But so just that was the other piece of feedback that we got from the chat. All right, well, thank you, and we'll go ahead and move on to the next item on our agenda. I think we'll actually talk about the jazz walking tour at the end of the meeting, but because I want to move on to Markos Egure, and he is working on a project of, I think, of considerable interest, not necessarily about a historic preservation project, but one more about the story of our history and the story of this place. And I'll go ahead and share the PowerPoint, but Markos, I'll have you go ahead and turn your camera on.
Okay. Start video. It says it's not working because the host has stopped it.
Oh, sorry about that. Let me, all right, try it again.
And
Great.
can you see me?
Yes.
Oh, great. All right, good.
I'll go ahead and start the share screen.
Hello, everybody.
All right.
Perfect.
Take it away.
Okay. Hello, everyone. We are the Artners, and we are a 501c3 nonprofit based out of Sacramento and Elk Grove. We were established in 2019. The founders are Teresa Gutierrez, president, pinkstreetart.com, and myself, vice president, Markos Egure, and I run a company named West Coast Images, and you can both find us at our .coms. We're a pretty active group for what we do. We're a mural production team. We have visual creative classes and services for the community. We were Midtown Art Gallery owners. We offer holistic painting services and programs. We host community and citywide mural expressions events. And our largest project is the WX Mural Museum Visionary Project. And if you can show the map of what we're talking about. So along this map here is the WX corridor, and we have proposed a project to the city of Sacramento and the state of California that we want to paint the pillars underneath the freeway. It has been approved, and we are in the phase 2 portion of this campaign. And you can see the areas are Southside Park, 18th Street, 20th through 24th, and Oak Park. And if people have been following along, we've been talking about the main focus of 20th and 24th Street, but there are other avenues or other sections of this project that are now being identified. So we do have a video that we'd like to share that will probably tell you, better than this guy. So if William could start that, we'll go with that. So, William.
Everything okay?
Yeah, I'll just, can you start the video?
Yeah, I started it, but
I'm not seeing it on this end.
okay. Apologies for the technical difficulties. I'll try that again.
This video was made in 2020 for a small presentation that we were doing for Caltrans, and it is made by, directed by Tomas Montoya of Sac Centric Productions. Uh-oh.
All right, one more time.
Gonna have to act it out. There we go. Art is a teacher, art is it's an educator, and murals in their history have always been that. The cultural impact of Sacramento having a mural museum is significant. What Caltrans has done for us is they've laid out this mathematical, utilitarian museum of giants. Creative imagery from every direction, 360 degrees, sharing the basic statement of representation, together unified, to implement the overall power of strength that's one in one community in one region.
All right.
All right. Well, thank you for sharing that. That kind of gives you the general summary of what we're doing. And we're excited about this project. I'm super stoked of just listening to the information about the preservation of the buildings and some of the stories that were shared on those videos. And there's so much more to showcase in our town. So we appreciate you showing that video. And really, this is more of a question if anybody has any, and to let everybody know that we're starting our campaign and the fundraising will begin.
Okay. Looks like there's a question. How is construction affecting the project?
The construction affected it by pushed it back a couple years. The availability for the main room or the main section of 20th through 24th will not be available until the year 2024. But we're looking to start on the other phases, and most likely it'll be around the Southside Park area, and then we'll probably start painting in 2023. As what William is showing are various slides of just ideas from what this visionary concept could look like. And there are different views for 21st, 22nd, and 23rd. There's the view with no bridge. Now the whole freeway is going to be bridged.
All right. So how many murals are we looking at total? About how many total in the project is envisioned right now?
260 columns were proposed. That takes you from 6th Street into Oak Park. From Southside Park to Oak Park.
All right. And are there ways that once these murals are put up that they could be protected from damage or subsequent alteration?
Yes. Caltrans is pretty extensive of how they write their contracts. So a lot of those concerns are addressed in the initial layout before we even begin.
Okay. And it looks like one person who's watching right now was involved in a little bit was she worked for Caltrans when Chicano Park was being painted out. That's the bridges, the bridge, I-5 and the Coronado Island Bridge in San Diego.
Yes.
So, and I know there's already been some comparisons made between the two.
There has. We have some linkage of cultural significance, but also that we're following the model of the same context of we want to share what has been removed. Unlike Chicano Park that went through a certain neighborhood, we are showcasing a lot more stories of the Sacramento region, including a strong image appreciation and representation of the first people of the nations that were here before us.
All right. Let's see. Let me see if there's any question. I have a couple of hands raised. A couple of people who maybe would like to speak, to ask questions.
Most definitely.
Okay, I'll take them in order. Let's see. I have Maddie. I'll go ahead and let you. Let's see. Oh, I'll let you talk. So your mic is live now. If you'd like to ask a question. Maddie, are you there? Okay, I've requested that she unmute, but I'm not hearing her, and her mic is still off. So I'll move on to Jennifer, and then Maddie. We'll get back to you. Jennifer, you just unmute.
Unmuted.
Go ahead.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, could you explain your fundraising activities?
My fundraising activities is that we have been tasked to raise 100% of the funds. We are going to start different campaigns to begin. We currently have one that we're titled the Mural, the WXM Community Connectors. And I don't know if you can see one behind me. And these are 15-inch tall 3D scale model replicas, and artists and other people of interest are telling their stories on these pillars. The other fundraisers that are going to happen are going to soon to begin, and we'll be reaching out to all of Sacramento to, sorry about that.
So are you selling those pillars, and for how much?
The starting price is $500, but the artists are setting their price to earn as much as we can. And all the artists that have joined this movement are what I'm calling artists of champions, because they're all donating their time for the Mural Museum movement. We will have videos and artist talks, and we're in development of making those today.
Okay, thank you, Jennifer. And then we had a question from Bruce Marwick. How will designs be submitted for the project, and will there be an open call for artists?
Yes, we had one in 2019 when we started this proposal. It was put on hold because Caltrans was going to do the construction, and we will have another call for artists once we establish the foundation of where we're going to start painting the first phase. So it will be happening soon. It is on our websites and in our social medias platforms, and those are Mural Expressions and Artners.
All right. And then Rick Castro asked if there's any information about high school scholarships.
The high school scholarship is a program that we ran and is over in a couple days, but we have a few high school seniors that have filled out some applications and are currently being reviewed today.
Okay, and so I know you just recently got approval for this. Do you have a date yet for when the first phase of painting is going to start?
A loose date would probably be towards the end of the year, hopefully before the winter starts. But it depends on the construction. As soon as they move all the equipment and deem it safe that we can be underneath there. So a lot of it is still in the Caltrans arena.
All right. And then what's the website where people can learn more?
They can learn more at muralexpressions.com. There's a link for the WX campaign, or they can go to the nonprofit website of artners.org.
All right, I'm entering both of those into the chat so people can check out those links directly. Okay, well, thank you, Markos, so much for the update about the project, and appreciate you sharing it with us. It sounds like there's a lot of people who are really excited about it.
Thank you very much. I'm very excited myself.
Yeah, and that connection between two places, between the underneath the freeway and the neighborhoods on either side, which really were severed, as we saw in the videos that Sean showed, by redevelopment, by freeway construction. These walls were created, and so how do we make a giant wall disappear? And actually, Markos and I a few weeks ago were wandering around under the freeway, and it felt like, how do you make something this gigantic go away? Magic.
Magic. There it is.
And that's what this is.
It's artistically magical redevelopment. How's that?
All right. Okay. Well, we're going to go ahead and move on to our next item, but thanks for being here.
Cool. Thank you.
All right. Next on our agenda, we're going to very briefly talk about this organization's plans for the coming year. And first and foremost, one thing that we will be starting this afternoon is walking tours. We used to do periodically either our members only tours or our Jane Jacobs Walk series of tours with other organizations. And because of where we are, because we haven't done any in-person events in 2 years, really since the February Roundtable in 2020, today will be the first in-person event that we've done since then. And because we feel like outdoor tours have a greater element of safety than indoor tours, although we're going to start doing indoor things as well. And also because they happen in public. They happen where people can see them. When people see a tour going on or a group of people wandering around, they listen in, they want to know what's happening, they want to learn more. So it's an opportunity to reconnect with people that we've been out of touch with for a while. Our annual home tour, obviously it's our most popular event. The 2021 home tour we did online via video, and the home tour subcommittee is going to start meeting next month, and we're going to talk about, do we want to do another virtual tour like we did in 2021, or do we want to return to in person? Or do we want to take some of the lessons that we learned and apply them to what we'd traditionally been doing for almost half a century now? And maybe try something new. And we don't know yet. A lot of this is very much experimentation and opportunity to take some of the lessons of the past 2 years and apply them to the present day. I think things went pretty well. I also had a question, Don, if you're on, maybe you can help respond to this. There was a question about one of the videos for the home tour in 2021 was of the home currently occupied by Sacramento Mayor Heather Fargo. And we promised in that video that we were going to show a longer and more complete video this year. And would it be possible for you to give us an update on what's happening with that? Okay, I don't see Don, so maybe he stepped away from the camera for a moment. But we're still planning on showing that video, and we will. Oh, thank you, Don.
Is my microphone on?
Yes.
Okay, so you can hear me.
Yes.
All right. Catherine and I met just about a week, 10 days ago, and we sketched out what we wanted to do with the Fargo video. And we'll be sharing those ideas at the next home tour meeting and get some input from everybody. And from there, we will go on.
All right, terrific. Thank you. So we'll keep everybody updated. If you're not on our email list, make sure to sign up for our emails. The next major project that we've been engaged in, we actually started this project in 2015 when we held our annual home tour in the neighborhood of Richmond Grove, which is roughly the area between the South Side neighborhood around Southside Park and the Poverty Ridge neighborhood along 21st Street. And this area is really one of the last corners of the central city that isn't yet protected by a historic district. And because parts of this neighborhood are starting to be encroached upon, and some houses that we feel, if they were they had already been located in a historic district, they would have been considered contributors to that historic district and protected. But because they were individual houses that hadn't been evaluated, they were found not individually eligible as landmarks and thus okay for demolition. Unlike the situation in East Sacramento that Sean mentioned, where they evaluated a house and found that it was significant just as a single house to be a landmark. The best way to plan for preservation and growth is to know in advance where the historic places are in a neighborhood, both so you know what is eligible and what needs to be protected and what is ineligible and is thus a space where you can do infill. And most of the city of Sacramento, something like 90%, has never been surveyed. So it's imperative that for growth to happen, as well as protecting what we care about, for more of the city to be surveyed. And the city's staff, they do what they can. They do an amazing job, but their resources are very limited. So part of what Preservation Sacramento does as an organization is do these surveys in advanced historic districts and work with neighborhoods to establish new historic districts. And so what you see here is a draft map from our consultant who's been working through 2020 and early 2021 of a proposed historic district for not only the Richmond Grove neighborhood, but for the areas around it The area that's sort of gold and gray colored, that's the existing South Side Historic District, which extends up T Street to between 15th and 16th. But it really only follows that T Street alignment, which is where the streetcar line was. And a lot of the neighborhoods around it were ignored or were passed over, in some cases because the buildings were too new at the time when when a lot of these surveys were done in the 1980s, or because they just weren't on people's radar. And so the kind of houses that we're looking at are ones like this. This is a streamlined modern house from 1941. So imagine that. It generally takes about 50 years for a building to be eligible for the National Register or the Sacramento Register, which means that a house built in 1941 that someone was looking at, say, in the 1980s, that's not 50 years old yet. So it's a pretty house, but it's not eligible. But this building now it is eligible, and we did a little research on it. This was the Percy Lee House. It was designed by Lawrence and McCarthy for Percy Lee, who was a significant member of Sacramento's Chinese American community. He was active in the Bing Kong Tong Association, serving as vice president. He organized charity events and fundraising, including war bond drives during World War II, and his children still live in the house. So this is the kind of house that we're talking about. Another thing about the videos that were just shown, they talked about redevelopment and the displacement of communities of color from the area that's now Capitol Mall, the place we'll be marching this afternoon. The people who lived in these communities didn't disappear. They moved into new neighborhoods. Some moved to Oak Park, predominantly the African American community, and the Japanese community and the Chinese community, and some of the African American community moved into Richmond Grove, and they built places like this. So there are also older buildings, mixed use buildings like Nick's Market. And one of the things about this neighborhood is it is a mixed use neighborhood. Very often older schools have thought about historic preservation focused principally on residential, and they would refer to a building that's an apartment building or a mixed use building with a store in it as an intrusion. But that's not the case here. These were the same sort of neighborhoods we talk about today, mixed use neighborhoods, walkable neighborhoods where there are multiple uses within the neighborhood that people can connect with. And so a building like this is a contributor to a neighborhood like this. We mentioned the Women's Civic Improvement Club was mentioned in the earlier presentation about Oak Park. Before they were in Oak Park, this is an African American women's organization. The first building associated with the WCIC was located in Richmond Grove at 19th and T Street. And it's being identified not only as a contributor to the district, but an individual landmark. And this was originally it was built for a German family that had, I think, 10 kids, and so it had a lot of bedrooms. And when they sold the house, it was in an unrestricted neighborhood, so it could be purchased by people who weren't white. For the most part, if you were outside the central city in many of the newer neighborhoods, racial covenants prevented purchase. But the Women's Civic Improvement Club was able to buy this house and turn it into a women's boarding house. Very often there weren't very many places in Sacramento where as a single African American woman you could rent a place that was safe and clean and decent. So that's what this building was. Their later home, which is actually even larger, it was an old mansion owned by a Portuguese farmer on X Street, was demolished by the freeway. So this is a very unique and special property, and it's one that it's not in the best repair, and many might walk past and go, that building, it's an old house, sure, but it's not necessarily that aesthetically appealing, but its importance has to do with its association with the intangible past. And the other contexts, Art Deco, mid-century design, and mixed use, things like this apartment building, the Monroe, represent a different era of historic preservation, but it's all part of the same neighborhood as these craftsman bungalows along 16th Street. So this mixed use neighborhood is what we're nominating. We did our first outreach event, passing out some flyers at the Lunar New Year event on 10th Street. And the western boundary of this district does include the post-redevelopment Japantown along 10th Street between V and W, in order to capture not just, like I said, not just the architecture, but also the cultural legacy of these places. And that's really the contemporary historic preservation story that we want to tell. And that really is our main project for 2022, is that historic district, but there will be others. Let me just change screens quickly. In 2016, Preservation Sacramento, as well as Sacramento Heritage and Sacramento Historical Society, were participants in an event called Art Hotel that took place at the Marshall Hotel and the adjacent Jade Apartments. And we led a walking tour called the Jazz Tour that walked around the neighborhood and identified, we took a closer look at a few buildings that, again, they're architecturally significant places, the ones that still exist, but they also have associations with our past. And all of the places on this tour were jazz clubs. And so we will be revisiting that tour today. We're going to meet at the corner of 7th and K in Ali Yousefi Square, which is Ali Yousefi, as many of you know, was a developer who worked on projects like Warehouse Artist Lofts and the 700 block of K Street. Passed away a few years ago, and the plaza was renamed in his honor. And we'll walk down K Street, and we will end up at 11th and L Street by around 4 p.m. So it'll be a one-way tour. It'll take about an hour. The path that we're taking is accessible, so people with mobility devices will be able to follow along. And we'll look at about a dozen different buildings and a few admittedly vacant lots where buildings used to be to talk about the musical history of these places. And that will be the first walking tour this year. It won't be the last. We're planning out the rest of the year. Our Jane Jacobs Walk series is going to come back in May, and it's not just going to be one weekend or even 1 week. We're going to be doing Jane Jacobs walks and doing connected walks with other organizations. We're talking with the Tweed Riders about their seersucker ride, with the Old City Cemetery about their walking tour in May, and with other local history and preservation organizations, neighborhood groups, walking groups, and bicycle groups to create a citywide series of strolls through neighborhood, looking not only at the history, but at the future of our cities. And that's going to happen through the summer. And okay, obviously weather is going to be a factor. We kind of know there's going to be a period late this summer where things are going to be on fire. We're probably going to want to stay inside for those. But as long as we can, as long as it's safe, and as long as we have the ability to do so, we will be sorry. We're going to do what we can. And the reason why we do all this is because this is what funds our activities and what promotes our organization and what drives membership. Catherine, your hand is up, so I'll go ahead and let you speak if you want to turn on your mic. Do you have anything to say or to ask a question?
I just took my hand down. The only reason I put it up is I didn't know if Don was here or not to talk about the Azevedo House.
Okay, yes, he's already talked about that. All right, thank you. Okay, let me check and see if there's any other. Okay, Peter Gannett asked whether there's an update on the capital situation, and that's a wonderful segue for another member of our board, for Karen Jacques. And Karen, I'll have you go ahead and turn your camera on. Let me see if I can.
Okay.
And I'll just let you take it away.
Okay, and that was the perfect segue. So this is a really critical time right now in the battle to save the historic integrity of our capital, which includes the original 1860s Capitol, the Capitol Annex building that is slated for demolition, and a major segment of Capitol Park. And they're all part of the National Register nomination. If you've been up to the Capitol in the last couple of weeks, you've seen that things have been fenced off, that trees are being dug up and put into boxes. Those are the trees that are supposed to be moved. Nobody ever provided any information as to where, but every question we've asked about plans for Capitol Park have gone unanswered. But the trees are now sitting in boxes, and there's a real question about whether trees treated that way and sitting in boxes will be able to survive. There was an attempt to get a restraining order to stop that, and the judge said, well, they're in boxes, it's reversible, they could be put back in their original holes. So it did not get a restraining order for that. But next week, well, at the beginning of March, some potentially completely irreversible stuff is slated to start. On March 1st, the General Services has said that they will begin asbestos abatement in the annex. And that has the potential to do irreparable damage, because if one is doing asbestos abatement in a building that is going to be torn down, one goes in with no regard for saving anything. You just want to get the stuff out in a safe manner. If one is doing that in a building that's going to be preserved, then you protect historic fabric and you look at what can be sealed off so that the asbestos is still there, but it doesn't provide a risk to anybody. So that's slated to begin at the beginning of March. And then the state has also said that as of March 7th, they will begin to saw down all the trees that they've decided they don't want and aren't worth moving and whatever. And that includes large historic trees that would take multiple generations to grow back. And it's been like a moving target because the state doesn't really tell us clearly which is which, and which specific trees are slated to come down. But in any event, it would not be good. In terms of ongoing work to challenge this, the goal is to get this project back to the drawing board, rethought in a way that saves the annex, addresses all of the problems that it has, and it does have serious problems with systems that need to be brought up to date and staircases that aren't wide enough and on and on. The goal is to get those problems addressed while saving the historic annex, to save all of the park that's left at this point, all of the trees, and to also get the Visitor Center, the proposed Visitor Center, completely redesigned and its entrance put someplace else so that you don't demolish the West Capitol and permanently destroy the integrity of the facade of the primary entrance to our original Capitol building. So there are two different groups that are working on this. Save the Capitol, Save the Trees, which is a group of individuals that have come together to get legal recourse, and then Save Our Capitol. And 4 lawsuits have been filed. 2 of those lawsuits are the kind of standard EIR lawsuit that gets filed when you have an EIR that is completely inadequate, as all of us defending the annex and the historic Capitol believe the current EIR is. And one of those suits is filed by Save the Capitol, Save the Trees, and the other by Save Our Capitol. Then there have been 2 other lawsuits that were filed. One of those by Save the Capitol, which is over the issue that while this is a historic building, the State Historic Preservation Officer was never consulted, which is supposed to be consulted by law. And as I've said at previous meetings, the State Historic Capitol Commission was totally circumvented and couldn't get any information out of joint rules. And 2 of the activists now working to stop all of this are Dick Cowan and Paula Pepper, both of whom were on that commission. And Roberta Deering was also on that commission, and we still stay in touch with her from Michigan. She's still following what's going on. And then the other non-CEQA case, or I'm not a lawyer, it may technically be considered a very specific form of CEQA, but it's what's called a pre-commitment lawsuit, that a decision was made by joint rules to demolish the annex without doing any analysis whatsoever of the alternative of keeping it. So at this point, the lawsuit from Save Our Capital that was about no review by SHPO also filed for a restraining order to stop any further damage from happening. And they were just denied with no explanation, nothing. But that does not end the restraining order issue, because both of the EIR lawsuits and the lawyers handling those have filed, and we're expecting a rulings in this coming week, and we're very hopeful that one or both of those will be favorable, because the demolition is so clear, and if it happens, then it makes a part of the EIR moot, the part that would at least save the annex itself. So we are very optimistic about being able to get a hold on this coming week. And as I said, this is a really critical time for all of the efforts to save the annex. We are still fundraising, and we still desperately need people to help us with that. The attorneys involved have been really reasonable in their fees. They see this as this case of being of public interest, but they too have to make a living. And everybody involved in this wants to get the final couple payments in a timely fashion. So we are asking yet again, as I've done at previous roundtables, to please make a donation toward this effort, so that we can, because we're still very hopeful that we can halt this and get it rethought.
Okay,
And
Karen,
then,
if people want to donate, where can they go? How do they donate?
what they can do is they can go to PAC, Public Accountability for the Capital's website, which is Save CalCap, which you said you'd put into the chat.
SaveCalCap.org. I just put it in the chat, and it's on the screen right now.
That's where you can go, and that's where you can also get a great deal of other information about what's going on and all of the issues with the building. The other thing that we are asking
also
people
donate
to do,
there, right?
and the information will be on the website, but is to write by snail mail or call, because apparently they look at snail mail, but they don't pay much attention to email from the public, to our governor, so to Governor Newsom, to Speaker Anthony Rendon, to Pro Tem Tony Atkins, and then to the chair and co-chair of the Disastrous Rules Committee that's brought this mess forward. So that's Ken Cooley and Bob Hertzberg. And one of the things that just I got very interested in was looking back, because of a letter that architect Ray Gavigian sent right before the move to the governor. And he is an architect, and he was one of the people involved in the fight to save the original Capitol back in the 70s. Back then, the legislature, in its quote wisdom, had a plan to knock down the 1860s Capitol, modify the park and put up twin towers. And that led to a fight that got the project rethought. And our historic original Capitol was saved. And then, of course, more recently, it had the wonderful rehab that brought it up so that it meets all current health and safety standards and has retained its historic fabric. And that's what we hope for here. So I very much appreciate everybody's time. I've been speaking at all of the preservation roundtables, and I hope that by the next time, I will have some positive news to report. I hope at least I'll have a date for when the 2 CEQA lawsuits will be heard, because we don't yet have that date. So thank you again, and I'll do my best to answer any questions. Some of the issues may still be unknown.
Okay, I don't see any hands raised or any questions in the chat or the Q&A.
Well, then just please make a donation and do the follow-up. And any donation, whatever it is, however big or however small, we really, really want to win this battle. This is arguably the most significant historic resource in the state of California, certainly in the public realm. Thank you.
Okay, terrific. Thank you. All right, and that brings us to the end of our roundtable. Thanks to all of our speakers, and I will be seeing some of you hopefully at 3 p.m. at Ali Yousefi Square at 7th and K Street for our walk, and others of you perhaps at 5 p.m. for the City of Trees Mardi Gras Parade. And to let people know, the May roundtable, in conjunction with walking tours and things like that, we are planning to hold in person. We don't have a location identified yet, but we will let you know as soon as one is selected. So thank you for your time and for watching, and hopefully if you're not a member, you'll join us. Preservation Sacramento, preservationsacramento.org, and we'll talk to you soon. And goodbye.